Olivia woke up suddenly and tried to figure out what had awakened her. A dog was barking at the far end of the tennis court. Another echoed it from the direction of the golf club, and then Olivia heard sounds from Emma's former room. In the crib, Christopher stirred. The baby monitor both distorted and amplified the sound. Olivia was about to quietly peek into his room, but the baby settled down, and she dropped her head back onto the pillow. Before closing her eyes, she glanced at the bedside clock. It was showing midnight. The woman was just dozing off when a quiet voice reached her. "You're mine now, Christopher," it said. It seemed the night pressed down on her with its suffocating weight, crushing her, yet Olivia managed to part her reluctant lips. "That will never happen. Leave, Danny, or I'll call the police. I'm not the boy's father. His mother got what she wanted, now it's my turn." This must have been a dream. In the empty house, there was no one to talk to Olivia, but she was frozen with terror. And what did Emma want? For her son to be with her until he turns one. The child's father tormented and abused her for half that time. Maybe she wanted that too. She wished I fulfilled. She knew the price. Tears welled up in Olivia from grief. She paid fully for her mistake. We're not talking about that. Irritation crept into the voice. Maybe she hoped to trick me, he continued. But nobody can deceive me, so don't even try. It's my time now. Olivia herself didn't understand what she was trying to do, understand him or wake up. What time of yours? Your year with Christopher is almost up, so say goodbye to him while you still can, Olivia. And what's your name, since you know mine? No one knows mine. Olivia heard a muffled laugh, though it might just have been someone scratching the plastic microphone. See you on his birthday, the voice said. I'll leave you a sign. Dogs barked again, joined by others. Their barking was real, and Olivia felt it. No other sounds were heard in the night. Realizing this, she fell asleep. Late in the morning, lying in bed, Olivia reminisced about her dream. Perhaps she truly feared that Christopher's father would show up, having sniffed out that her husband was away at a directors' meeting. But the court had ordered Danny to stay away from the child, and in any case, she could call the police. Or perhaps she was so anxious because exactly a year ago, on his first birthday, Christopher had lost his mother. That's why Olivia wanted to try this time to organize a real celebration for her grandson, and she was pondering how to do it when she heard the boy fussing. In the mornings, the toddler always sleepily muttered some gibberish as if his tongue needed time to wake up. A shroud of winds, fat chain. She almost believed she could discern something like that in his babble, or even a boar roasted in the greenhouse. Where did he get those words? 30 years ago, she was delighted listening to Emma's infant monologues, but now she tried not to remember that. Meanwhile, Christopher started talking to Nosik and Grumbler, the plush bears sleeping with him in the crib. When he began drumming on the wooden slats, either pretending to be a drummer or demanding freedom, Olivia entered the nursery. Christopher stood, holding onto the crib's railing, facing the door, and she involuntarily remembered Emma. His tiny face was almost a copy of his mother's light hair, high forehead, small upturned nose, plump lips, stubborn chin. Only Emma's eyebrows were constantly furrowed lately, and she dyed her hair in all sorts of colors, but none of them helped to make her husband peaceful. In general, little could calm him down. Last year, Emma's eyes dimmed and became lifeless like stones, and her smile. Olivia saw it very rarely, more resembled a plea for help, even after she decided to break up with Danny. At least, Emma almost took the matter to court, but perhaps because of this, she was even more afraid. Olivia suspected that was the case. Ready for an adventure? She asked Christopher. Vengeances. Ah, you little parrot. Olivia smiled and suddenly shuddered. The baby monitor, which she always placed on top of the blue dresser, was lying on the floor. It was clear that Christopher couldn't have reached the cord, and she felt a chill realizing she hadn't heard the sound of it falling. The thought flashed that it was her mistake. She had missed something. Apparently, she was getting old. "Don't do that again, Christopher," she said, putting the monitor back in its place. The boy stubbornly pouted his lower lip. "I didn't do it, Grandma." "Well, don't be naughty. If it wasn't you, then who was it?" "The uncle." "What uncle?" "He comes to me." "Who comes to you, Christopher? It's not your—" She blurted out anxiously and reluctantly finished. "Not your father? It's not Daddy?" "Not Daddy," the child said and laughed. Olivia suspected that he might just be repeating her words. "Then who is it, Christopher?" The child looked puzzled for a moment, then said, "Dark." "So you haven't seen him? And do you know why? He isn't real. It's just a dream." Astounded. "Sometimes I think you're teasing me," said Olivia, though she herself didn't believe it. Of course, Christopher must have accidentally hit the monitor when waking up. Olivia picked up the child, and he, warm from sleep, hugged her neck. He was eager to get down to the floor and run around the rooms. Olivia caught up with him in the kitchen and helped him take off his nightwear. After taking him off the potty and praising him for doing everything right, she dressed him, trying to make it seem like he almost dressed himself. Then she placed her grandson in a high chair, prepared breakfast, and then watched as he managed with the cereal, almost not spilling milk and not getting messy. Nonetheless, she meticulously wiped his cheeks. Christopher tried his best to dodge and asked, "So, what shall we do this morning?" "Watch trains." Christopher chatted non-stop as they walked half a mile along the wide suburban road. "They're jumping for the ball," he said near the tennis courts, and "such a tiny car," near the golf course playground. "Let's go read," he announced, passing by the deserted schoolyard. Olivia knew. The grandson remembered how she explained that he would go to school too. "Robbers' jugs," Christopher declared in front of the antique shop window, and she understood. He was now thinking of the story about Ali Baba that she had read to him. He called the hair salon visitors Auntie Astronauts because of the shape of the dryers they sat under, and at the flower shop window he said, "Where do flowers go?" And Olivia, hearing this, tried to push away thoughts of funerals. When they reached the railroad, she tightened her grip on his trusting, warm hand. "Red bell," said Christopher. Indeed, when the red signal lights came on, a sharp bell sounded. As the barriers on both sides of the crossing lowered, they had to stop, and Christopher impatiently wiggled his fingers, clenched in Olivia's hand. When the train moved away from the station, Olivia became curious and asked, "What does it look like?" "Like many stamps." Christopher still remembered how they glued stamps onto envelopes last Christmas. The strip of carriage windows reminded him of that. Emma, at his age, loved to lick Christmas stamps before sticking them. Now they were simply peeled off the sticky backing, and the next generation, Olivia thought, might not know this if greetings were sent by computer. 6 trains passed by, and the barrier lowered 3 times before Christopher finally agreed to go home. After putting him to bed, Olivia prepared lunch and took care of dinner. After lunch, they walked past the Conservative Club and the Masonic Hall to reach the Little Sturdies children's group. "Oh, our little chatterbox has arrived," de Maitland exclaimed from a distance when Christopher rushed to meet his friend Daisy, who was as talkative as he was. Olivia usually didn't trust her grandson with strangers. She had even retired early to take care of him. But this time, she asked Daisy's mother, Jonquil, if she would agree to pick up Christopher after the group the next day while she was baking his birthday cake. "With pleasure, more than any other child," Jonquil replied, and for some reason, Olivia was reminded of her midnight dream. At home, she was surprised to see the mess Christopher had made. Toys were scattered all over the floor. After all, he had even helped her clean up in the morning. And when had he managed to scatter everything again? Olivia reminded herself that it wouldn't be long before the boy grew up, and she prematurely mourned the loss of all this chaos. And after the meal, she lingered, slowly wiping his dirty cheeks. She finally relaxed when Hubert called. "Where's the head of the family?" he inquired. "At the moment, under a woman's supervision." "I see." Hubert seemed puzzled by her tone. "Is everything all right at home?" "It's just unusual not having you around. I'll be back for the main day, you know that. Otherwise, is everything okay with you?" "Yes, generally everything is as usual." Olivia felt that this was exactly what her husband hoped to hear, exactly what he expected from her. "And how about you?" she asked. "Not really. Imagine, I still have 3 days of listening to how we can improve the bank's public image. I'd prefer to improve their operations if it came down to it." Hubert spoke too loudly, risking being overheard by colleagues whose voices could be heard nearby. "But enough grumbling. May I talk to the young man before bed?" "He hasn't even gone to bed yet," Olivia replied, switching to speakerphone. "Do you hear who this is, Christopher?" "Uncle." But when Hubert greeted Christopher, the boy's voice sounded much happier. "Grandpa, how's the young generation doing? Just 3 more nights and we'll see each other." "Look, nights?" "Yes, 3 nights. Are you obeying Grandma? Keep an eye on her and make sure nothing bad happens to her while I'm at the meeting." For a moment, Olivia thought the child was worried. "Nothing bad. Nothing will happen," Olivia reassured him. "Now wish Grandpa a good night. He's tired and wants to rest." "Good night, Grandpa," Christopher said with such enthusiasm that both grandmother and grandfather laughed together. Before bathing, the grandson helped Olivia pick up the toys. "Hot," he said seriously as Olivia tested the water, and then, "Now it's not." Olivia could hardly call herself religious. She paid even less attention to this aspect than her parents did, so it seems her fervent prayers for Emma didn't reach their mark. And yet, every time she saw Christopher sitting in the bath, she involuntarily thought of the baptismal font and baptism. Olivia dried her grandson, kissed him, and swore to herself to protect him as long as she lived, even if it sounded a bit pretentious. Olivia helped the little one into his nighttime onesie, then laid him down in his crib. Sitting beside him, she flipped through the pages of Emma's old book, and her gaze fell on the title of one of the stories, the one Emma loved the most. It was no surprise that Olivia had dreamt of something similar, but now she didn't feel like reading that particular story to Christopher. "Many years ago," she began instead, "there lived a poor woodcutter with his wife and 2 children. The boy was named Hansel and the girl, Gretel." She skipped over the oven and the dire peril that threatened the children. The children were saved, and Christopher drifted off to sleep peacefully. Olivia turned off the light, carried the baby monitor downstairs, and while dining, kept it in front of her on the kitchen table. The day with Christopher had exhausted her, as usual, but she wouldn't have wanted it any other way. Olivia went to bed early. She woke up suddenly, as if jolted, and immediately noticed the zeros on the clock face. The bedside clock was showing midnight. The last thing she needed, she thought, was for this to become a habit, waking up at the same time every night. And then a voice sounded. It was so muffled it seemed to come from inside her head. "Is that you again?" she whispered, or thought she did. "What do you want this time?" "What I always get." "You didn't get it in the fairy tale, did you? Because your name was Guest." "You mean that old tale? Don't believe everything you read." "What, aren't you called Rumpelstiltskin?" "That's just a fairy tale." Emitting a constricted laugh, akin to the rattle of many small teeth, the voice continued. "Some of it's true, though. I know when I'm needed." "Then you should understand when you're absolutely not needed. Your daughter needed me when she required a witness. Don't you dare speak of her." Olivia managed to force out a laugh. "Why am I even talking to you? You're just a dream." "Do you still think you're dreaming?" The voice was definitely offended. "You'll see. There will be another sign." And it vanished, leaving her alone. Still, Olivia doubted whether it had been there at all. Suddenly, she realized she couldn't remember the witness from Emma's case who had testified in her favor. He lived a floor below theirs and Danny's apartment, and confirmed that Danny had abused both his wife and child. Now, no matter how hard she tried, Olivia couldn't recall either his name or even what he looked like, only that he was much shorter than average, almost a dwarf. When Christopher woke up, the April sun was already high. She lay there, enjoying the child's whimsical monologue, until she pondered why his babbling sounded even stranger than usual. Surely he couldn't actually be saying things like sacrifice ram, chain balustrade, or even more so, in the pool, a crown, overcook. Such thoughts. The babbling sounded unusual, the voice as if distant, and Olivia suddenly had the impression her grandson was being taken away from her. She bolted out of bed and dashed to the next room, almost falling along the way. The door opened a few inches and stuck, hitting an obstacle. At least Christopher was in his crib, sleepily smiling as Olivia squeezed into the room. The plastic microphone lay on the floor a few meters from its spot on the shelf, torn from its cord. Olivia picked it up, her hands shaking. "Who threw this here, Christopher?" she asked gently. "Uncle," the child replied with a hint of defiance. "Uncle has teeth." "What do you mean?" "Lots of teeth." And as if to show how many, the boy opened his mouth wide and stretched the corners with his fingers, making it even wider. "Lots," he repeated. "Comes when I sleep." Olivia dearly wished to believe her grandson was bragging about his own teeth. "Do you remember what I told you about that, Uncle? Comes when I sleep." Olivia began to straighten his blanket when a new thought struck her. "Tell me, can you climb out here to me?" Christopher got to his feet, but looked at her reproachfully. "Better you pick me up." These words didn't prove that the child couldn't have climbed out of the crib on his own, but at the moment he was reaching out to Olivia, and she lifted him into her arms. It was hard for her not to clutch him tight in a hug, though she knew that wouldn't protect him from everything. As her grandson explored the rooms, she followed closely behind, pondering how hard it was for her to part with him, even for a moment. After seating the little one in his high chair, Olivia tried to finish all the morning routines as quickly as possible. "Where shall we go today?" she asked, catching her breath. "Change books." "A remarkably good idea," Olivia responded, realizing it was something else they could do. The library was on the opposite side of the railway, past the nearby park, which she had promised Christopher they would visit. Olivia had signed a petition against the closure of 6 libraries and spent some time watching as her grandson grabbed books from a low table in the children's section. Having settled him in a small chair, Olivia approached a computer. She was aware that on the eve of her daughter's death anniversary, she was likely suffering from hallucinations, yet she looked up the address of Emma's last rented apartment and the landlord's name. At home, it took reading 3 books from the library before Christopher finally fell asleep. She managed to carry him upstairs to his crib without waking him. The baby monitor was moved to her room. Hearing her heartbeat, she dialed a number and waited a long time before a female voice answered. "Wesley's residence. I need to find out the name of one of your tenants." "Sorry, we do not provide such information." "I understand, but this is an unusual case. He was a witness at my daughter's trial, Emma Marshall. She lived in the same building. She died a year ago." Olivia's heart was now beating twice as fast. Finally, the woman spoke. "And you're asking for the gentleman's name because I can't remember it, and now I need it to keep custody of my grandson." "I'll consult. Please hold." Olivia's heartbeat intensified during the minute she waited for a response. Eventually, she heard a muffled whisper and leaned towards the baby monitor to check if the voices were coming from it.
Subscribe to our channel.
After another long minute filled only with her racing pulse, a new voice came on the line. "Mrs. Marshall, this is Tony Wesley. My condolences on your loss. I still have a grandson, Mr. Wesley. Jane mentioned that. I remember your daughter and the tragic circumstances of her passing. I'd like to help. Then please do. As I said, I'd like to, but I can only assume there was a glitch in our registration system. We have no records of the tenant you're inquiring about." Olivia's heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the voice on the line. "What do you mean? You have no records?" "It appears the rental was never officially recorded. It was a brief period, just a couple of weeks. Before that, a lady had lived there for a long time who then moved out, and afterwards another lady moved in, who still occupies the apartment to this day." "But he lived there, didn't he? You know someone lived there." "Of course someone did." Wesley's voice sounded uncertain. "I'm sorry, but no one here could even recall his name. In fact, he didn't really leave an impression on anyone." Olivia felt as if Wesley had taken from her not just a name, but something more significant. He stripped her of certainty, as if knocking the foundation out from under her feet. Muttering a gratitude she did not feel, she sat for a long time with the numb handset in her trembling hand. Should she call the court? What if there was no official record of the witness's testimony? Subconsciously, this prospect frightened Olivia even more than she realized. Of course, she shouldn't delay the call, but what if this anxiety was just a symptom of creeping old age? She never mustered the courage to make the call, and then Christopher woke up. After lunch, they walked in the park. On the deserted playground, the swings swayed as if someone had just jumped off and run away as they approached. Olivia was sure she had securely locked the gates, but she had returned to find them open more than once. The sign stated that dogs were not allowed on the playground, yet Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that a dog was lurking nearby, belly to the ground and teeth bared. She put Christopher on the swings and gave him a little push, then spun him on the merry-go-round, ready to catch him if he fell. All the while, she couldn't shake the feeling that an unwelcome visitor with a full set of teeth was sneaking around, hiding just behind her. Returning from their walk with Christopher, she involuntarily thought of the visitor hiding somewhere in the house. Perhaps it curled up in the fireplace, peeking at her through the glass door, or maybe it was hiding behind the sofa, ready to pounce. Olivia wouldn't have been surprised to find the uninvited guest sprawled in a chair, or worse, in Christopher's high chair. Of course, there was no one to be found. Olivia was feverish, her head pounding. She barely waited for Hubert's call and rushed to answer, almost dropping the phone. "How was your day?" she asked, as if his answer could return her to normal life. "Oh, strictly business." "What did you discuss this time?" Plenty of ideas that could certainly be put to effective use. Olivia understood her husband was reluctant to express his true opinion, likely to avoid being overheard. She desperately wished he were here, especially when he asked, "And how was your day?" "Our day?" Olivia hesitated to share her fears or the actions they had prompted. "Easy to guess," she said. "The library and the park." "Well then, everything is fine," Hubert responded, and Olivia could tell by his voice that he was genuinely relieved. "May I talk to our hero?" Switching to speakerphone, Hubert asked, "Are you taking care of our grandma?" "Yes, Grandpa," Christopher replied so earnestly and joyfully that Olivia had to suppress a nervous laugh. "Well, good boy, keep it up. Just 2 more nights and I'll take over your post." After ending the call, Olivia turned to Christopher. "Do you want to take even better care of Grandma?" "Yes," the child said, more solemnly than before. "Then you'll sleep with me in the room until Grandpa comes back, and we won't be bored if we wake up." Was she being overly protective? Sometimes she regretted not being as vigilant with Emma. Perhaps there was guilt in the fact that Emma had grown up so vulnerable that she couldn't protect her, couldn't save her from death. Deciding to act, Olivia moved the crib into the master bedroom, with Christopher energetically helping her. After bathing him, she put him to bed and sat beside him, reading about Cinderella, omitting all the unpleasant details, then went downstairs, taking the baby monitor with her. Olivia couldn't read. The silence in the baby monitor and throughout the house made her too nervous. Soon she decided to go to bed, but unexpectedly found herself sitting in front of her laptop instead. Rumpelstiltskin wasn't the only name for the creature in different versions of the old fairy tale. It was called by various names, and Olivia repeated them until they were firmly stuck in her memory. She felt ashamed for behaving like a senile old woman, but what could she overlook when it came to saving Christopher? Confident she remembered the names, she tiptoed back to the bed. As she got under the blanket, Christopher whispered something, and then was quiet. Olivia was sure she wouldn't be able to close her eyes, but she woke up in complete darkness just before midnight. Looking at the clock, she heard a voice. "So, you've been trying to guess my name? Try all you like." The voice was closer to her than to the child's crib. Perhaps it was just in her head. Squinting to see better, Olivia noticed nothing unfamiliar in the room except for the crib. "Will you leave us alone if I call you by name?" she asked so quietly she could barely hear herself. "Try. Perhaps you're called Witch Whoopity Sturi." "Not in this lifetime," came the mocking falsetto. "Well then, Tom Tit Tot. Neither Tot nor Tom, nor for your teats. Tihogram Ruikvedito. Missed, even if you could pronounce it correctly." Rejecting all her other attempts, the voice insidiously said, "Don't you want to inquire at the court?" Olivia instinctively became cautious. "Why would you care?" "Let them make sure their records don't have the name of the witness, and maybe they'll schedule a retrial." Her intuition telling her that calling the court was unnecessary, Olivia felt a chill. What difference does it make to you? Maybe they'll decide they need to talk to the father and give him a chance. No. Olivia forgot her fear in anger. You won't suggest that to them. Impossible. No one else can hear me. Christopher stirred in his crib, perhaps awakened by Olivia's cry, and the voice spoke again. I'll still leave you a sign. Or maybe you think you're doing all this yourself. No, I don't think so, Olivia began, and felt like she was talking to herself. Listening intently to the silence, trying to detect signs of another presence, she remained awake, but eventually fatigue took over, and Olivia woke up at dawn to Christopher's morning babble. Only fully waking up did she remember why the child's voice sounded closer than usual today, but it didn't help her understand what he was prattling about. Surely he couldn't actually be saying, "Warrior, trust the pair, the chain lies," let alone cut in the peacock pepper. The child, catching her eye, immediately began to joyfully tell her something, but Olivia involuntarily looked around for a sign. Maybe it was not in this room, if all this wasn't just the imagination of a deathly frightened not-so-young woman. Downstairs, she found nothing out of the ordinary either. Christopher again wished to watch the trains, but he was unusually silent along the way, as if he found nothing worthy of comment. The boy didn't even pay attention to a gnome figurine peeking out from behind the fence on the tennis court. Olivia had never noticed it before. Probably the wire fence had somehow hidden the gnome. Admittedly, it wasn't too surprising that he wasn't interested in the strange bush on the golf course, resembling a tuft of unkempt hair, but for Christopher to not remark on the child figurine that flashed and then disappeared from sight as they passed the school? Olivia was surprised, briefly noticing a child without adults in the store, and more than once, but concluded that these visions were the result of an almost sleepless night, as well as the crooked face that glanced at her from the antique shop window and dived into a vase. A robber in a pitcher. Christopher finally found his voice, though Olivia would have preferred him to stay silent a bit longer. The red lights at the crossing flashed, momentarily blinding her, and the jarring sound of the signal grated on her nerves. Even though the passing trains were almost empty, Christopher kept repeating, "He's looking." Of course, he meant the child on the other side of the tracks, a real child, not one of Olivia's hallucinations, a toddler in a stroller, next to whom stood a mother. Nonetheless, the phrase that the grandson parroted irritated Olivia. The trains reminded her of strips of film in a projector, and it was easy to convince herself that she distinctly saw a face in the lower corner of each window. only the top half of the face, the same one every time. 6 trains passed by the crossing before Christopher finally decided he had enough. By then, Olivia was fed up. After putting the child to bed, the woman lay down herself. She didn't intend to fall asleep, but when she woke up, Christopher was already standing, holding onto the bars, and was quite eager for lunch. After feeding and washing her grandson, she took him to Jonquil. "Don't worry and take your time," Jonquil told her as Christopher scampered into the house to meet Daisy. "Prepare your surprise as long as you need." At home, Olivia set about making the cake. Cooking didn't help her distract herself from thoughts of being alone in the house and memories of what had happened a year ago. She was on a train to London when the phone rang and Emma's last words came through. "I'm sorry, Mommy. You won't understand me, but it's for the best." For Olivia, it was incomprehensible how Emma could leave Christopher with a friend and consume a mix of street drugs and prescribed medications. Now, it seemed to her that she was beginning to understand her daughter, or were the memories simply having a detrimental effect on her sanity? After putting the cake in the oven, Olivia went upstairs to lock the cupboard. She didn't want Christopher, now sleeping in her room, to find the gifts too early. The low shadow that peeked out from behind the crib turned out to be just one of the plush bears. Olivia opened the cupboard to look at the gifts and, staggering, grabbed the wooden door to keep from falling. The boxes with gifts, which she had lovingly wrapped and laid along the back wall, were untidily piled in the left corner. So there was the sign. Or had she done it herself in her sleep, if not in delirium? What if all this was just delirium, induced by doubts and fear? Olivia dived into the cupboard, neatly arranged the gifts, and checked that the door was securely locked. The woman started to feel like this wasn't the only sign. Something else needed to be recognized. Though she tried hard, covering the cake with icing, the center of the large blue number on the yellow sugary background came out crooked, betraying a treacherously shaking hand. It was getting dark when Olivia got into the car. She was in a hurry, and so didn't immediately notice the tiny figure lurking on the child's seat. It was inconspicuous at first also because it was headless. A child's doll, a plastic baby, but its head had been bitten off, and the teeth marks still glistened wetly. The door was unlocked. Perhaps Olivia, absorbed in her thoughts, left it open when she came home. She threw the doll into a trash bin by the road and waited for her hands to stop shaking before starting the engine. Jonquil, who opened the door for her, was frowning. Olivia immediately became worried. Is something wrong? We had fun, although perhaps someone had a bit more fun than the others, and he has strange ideas about playing hide and seek, don't you think? Strange? How so? Olivia asked, sensing something. He kept telling Daisy that there was someone else looking for them. The girl felt a bit uneasy, to be honest. You shouldn't scare Daisy if you want to be friends with her. Olivia waited until she had Christopher settled in the child's seat, which was meticulously wiped down, before she casually inquired, "And who was playing hide and seek with you, Christopher?" "Mr. Toothster." Olivia gathered all her composure to keep from trembling. "Is that his name?" "That's what I call him." It was pointless to ask. There was no hope that Christopher could give her the real name, if it even existed. And at that moment, jolting so violently that the engine stalled, she realized what she had been trying to comprehend all this time. "Christopher," she asked, "what are you babbling about in the mornings when you wake up?" "I don't remember," Christopher replied almost indignantly. "In a dream." "I'm just curious," Olivia continued, praying she could remember them. "Where did you hear all those words?" "I don't remember. In a dream." Now Olivia was almost certain. She started the car and rushed home. No one was waiting for them in the high chair, and even Christopher's toys seemed untouched. Olivia played with the little boy, watched him eat his dinner, wiped the food remnants from his cheeks, all while words spun in her head, rearranging themselves into new shapes. By the time Hubert called, the words had yet to reveal their secret. "What did you dedicate your evening to?" he asked. "Just thinking. Try not to miss anyone too much, agreed? And I'll be with you tomorrow. I'll try to come home early." "And what are you planning to do?" "I want to rest a bit." The husband's voice sounded a bit guilty. "I'll make sure you get a chance to relax soon, too." Olivia turned on the speakerphone, and Hubert said, "Take good care of our lovely lady, Christopher, until I get home." There were no traces of invasion in the bathroom, and the cupboard remained locked. Olivia's head was spinning from words and their absurd fragments, so for bedtime, she chose the shortest story for Christopher about a king who didn't know he was naked. The boy listened seriously and solemnly, not even smiling when she kissed him, wishing him good night. Watching his reluctant descent into sleep, Olivia almost decided to stay upstairs, but then realized that the incessant noise in her head prevented her from thinking clearly. Grabbing the baby monitor, she hurried downstairs to the computer. Could the flicker of hope be merely a false lead? Websites that created anagrams weren't designed for long phrases like those she desperately tried to decipher. Finally, she found a site with a program that could do it and typed in one of the nonsensical sets of words she had involuntarily memorized while listening to the child. Moments later, a suggestion appeared on the screen that made her feel both a chill of horror and a thrill of triumph. "There it is," she whispered. "Miracles do happen after all." She tried several other combinations to test her guess, and then went to bed. Olivia didn't believe she would be able to sleep, but just in case, she set the alarm and hid the clock under her pillow. She woke up to a strange sensation, as if someone was touching her face. It turned out to be the vibration of the alarm. She was still trying to turn it off when a quiet voice came out of the darkness. "Are you waiting for me?" She didn't answer until she had dealt with the alarm. "Who are you talking to?" "Who else, if not to the woman who thinks she knows? And maybe also to Christopher, huh? When you said no one else can hear you, you didn't mean that I was the only one who could, did you? Smart woman. You all think you're so clever." "It's you who thinks you're smarter than everyone else," Olivia retorted spiritedly, forgetting to lower her voice. "You're worse than a child. You decided you could tease Christopher with impunity. That's how much you disdain us. But it never occurred to you that the little one might let me know, even if he doesn't realize it himself. Do you even understand what you're saying? Listen to yourself. You've lost your mind, Olivia." "No, as long as I still remember my name. Want to know why no one knows yours?" "Entertain me. I'm in no hurry since he's now mine. Because you have no name." Olivia heard giggling and the clicking of tiny teeth. "So, you can't name it and save him. And yet, I can tell you what you're called. I'm all ears, aside from the mouth. How about this? And cut the screw, swimmer." "Enough. That's not a name at all." The voice sounded sharp, like bared teeth. "I told you, you never had a name. Maybe you're called Chef Wayne, now a tenant. You're delirious, woman. You're as insane as your daughter was." "Yes, because you and Danny turned her life into hell." Grief made it hard for Olivia to keep control, but she knew she had to stay composed for Christopher's sake. "Color outside the feather about housing," she whispered. "That's not even a phrase." The voice was mocking, but malice was growing in it. "Enough. The time has come." "Yes," Olivia replied. "The time has come for me and my family." She was tired of teasing him. It was time to say the words the computer had given her. "You are called the firstborn devourer," she said. From the corner behind the crib, retreating with the howl of a predator, was a shadow. It was only slightly taller than Christopher, but wide and squat, like a toad. In the dim light, Olivia couldn't see it properly, especially the face, since it was tiny. However, she saw a gaping maw in which teeth gleamed, many small teeth, and then the jaws suddenly opened even wider, as if yawning. The head seemed to split in two and suddenly swallowed itself, the next convulsive swallow, and the squat body disappeared into the maw. The howl abruptly stopped, as if the creature had exploded, and Christopher woke up crying in his crib. As soon as he sniffled, Olivia rushed across the empty room and hugged the boy to her. "Happy birthday, my dear," she whispered. Subscribe to our channel. Don't miss new and very scary stories.